Iran's President Raisi has died. What now? 3 years ago, Ibrahim Raisi won the presidency in a rigged election. Some analysts suggested it was a premeditated move toward a more distinguished position. Ali Khamenei, the aging and ailing supreme leader, is well beyond the life expectancy of Iranians. Upon his death, it was expected that Raisi would aim to replace him. However, history is not without its irony. Instead of elevating him to the supreme of office, winning the presidency cost Raisi his life on May 19th, while returning from a visit to neighboring Iran, where Raisi had inaugurated a dam on the border. Authorities lost contact with his helicopter. It happened in a mountainous region about 86 km northeast of Tsa. The next day, state media confirmed Raisi was dead, along with the foreign minister who was traveling in the same helicopter. Much is still unclear about the crash. The official story so far is bad weather, but nothing is ever as it seems. In Iranian politics, many have begun to speculate about more nefarious explanations. Raisi's list of enemies is long both from without and within. It is not unreasonable to question whether his colleagues conspired to eliminate him. Nevertheless, nervous days are ahead for Tayyip. The president is dead, and it comes at a time of great geopolitical strife on the outside. Iran and its proxies are waging a conflict against America, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, from the inside, Iran's military and clerical power, brokers are battling for the succession of the supreme leader. The death of Raisi deepens infighting within the upper echelons of the theocracy. It changes everything everywhere all at once. There is no shortage of conspiracy stories. When it comes to Iran, with so many adversaries on all fronts, many Iranians wonder if the accident involved will play. The finger-pointing has already begun. Israel has come out preemptively, saying that it wasn't them, and U.S. officials have backed that up. Still, sometimes truth takes a backseat in geopolitics, and this is precisely the type of narrative that can be twisted toward strategic ends. Iran country has an unelected supreme leader at the top, but it also has a democratically elected president. This then makes Iran both totalitarian and democratic at the same time. Seeing it this way goes a long way to explaining why the country is the way it is after the revolution. In 1979, Iran emerged as the Islamic Republic. No such system existed at the time, so the leadership had to make up the rules on the go. The result was a government that mashed together two widely different political beliefs. Some parts are elected and some are unelected, but they're both tangled together like order in chaos. There is considerable tension between these two systems. Iranians elect the president through the parliament and the Assembly of Experts, which is the government body that chooses the supreme leader. Tangled interchangeably with the supreme leader is the unelected theocracy, which includes the military, the mosque, the judiciary, and the media, as well as advisory bodies, like the Practicality Council and the Guardian Council. The presidency has restrained powers, particularly when it comes to foreign policy. The supreme leader is the one who calls the shots. He sets the tone for domestic and foreign policy, including the country's dress code and nuclear program. But what happens when the supreme leader dies? That is the million-dollar question officially. The supreme leader is selected by a group of senior clerics and lawyers who make up the Assembly of Experts, which in turn is elected in a national vote. Raisi was one of the two leading candidates next in line to take the supreme leader's office. After his death, the other being Moshaveh, there are some other dark horse candidates, but it's hard to imagine them winning enough support in Iran's intricate political system. Raisi was considered an ideal consensus candidate. Yeah, he had overseen multiple branches of the government, and his hardline credentials were unquestionable. The conservative and military power brokers had hoped to employ him to advance their interests with Raisi gone. However, it is not clear who else could gather consensus to fill that role. Moshaveh is now the only leading candidate left. Even so, the problem with Moshaveh is that he is Supreme Leader K's second son. Moshaveh has amplified his credentials among the Iranian clergy in recent years. But if he came to power, it would make the theocratic process look like a hereditary transfer of power. Admittedly, Raisi wasn't popular either, but with him out of the picture, Moshaveh now has a clear shot to the top office. Moshaveh is now likely to speed run through the political system, making allies left and right. His most sought-after objective would be to make a deal with the power brokers from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Doing so would allow Moshaveh to weather any backlash. However, in turn, this would strengthen the role of the military within the country's political and economic landscape. For context, while Soleimani is widely seen as an ultra-conservative leader, he has on many occasions intervened against conservatives to support moderate-leaning lawmakers. For instance, he backed Rouhani's rise to the presidency in 2013, and he embraced negotiations with the United States over Iran's nuclear program. A supreme leader lacking such valiant power plays would reinforce Iran's reckless foreign policy driven by the military establishment. So, with a military-backed mastaba in power, Iran's political landscape might evolve from a theocratic democracy to something more militaristic in the decade. Following Iran could emerge as less religious conservative at home but more belligerent abroad. Seen in this way, the death of Raisi will shake politics in Tan. It will not affect the country's immediate security, but it will cloud the succession of the supreme leader, which in itself could evolve Iran's domestic and foreign policy. Few Iranians will mourn Raisi, though they will remember him as the hanging judge, a prosecutor in Tehran who sent thousands of political prisoners to the gallows in 1988. Meanwhile, the younger generation will remember him for his clueless handling of the economy. The president who stalked his cabinet with military men and clerics who watched as the real nosedived in value. In less than 3 years during his presidency, Raisi refused to press for domestic change, which is in contrast to his immediate predecessor, Hassan Rouhani. For instance, negotiated the nuclear deal with the West, while Ahmadinejad sought to operate independently from the supreme leader Raisi. Being a conservative insider with close ties to Soleimani, was perhaps the least consequential president in Iran's post-revolution. Evolutionary history, the theocratic half of Iran's government, will now need to reach some sort of consensus on Mujtaba, or negotiate for one of the other dark horse candidates, most likely another conservative insider in the meantime. The democratic bodies will need to find a new president swiftly and at a difficult time. The Constitution clearly sets out a succession process. A new election must be held within 50 days. Until then, Vice President Mohammed Mbir will assume the presidency. What you need to know about Mbir is that he is a bureaucrat much like Mike Pence. Mbir enjoys close ties to him, and the military he used to handle conglomerates worth tens of billions of dollars for both the supreme leader and the deputies from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. Eventually, though Mokhtar will be replaced by someone else, the next presidential election will be crucial. Whoever wins, conservatives or moderates, will likely oversee the transition from Ali Soleimani to a new supreme leader. It will shape the destiny of Iran in the decades to come. However, these power plays come at a time when Iran is engaged in a regional proxy conflict with America, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. Not surprisingly, many Iranians wondered if any of their adversaries had a role in the crash last month Iran came to blows with Israel. The Israelis had assassinated an Iranian general in Syria, and the Iranians retaliated with a volley of more than 300 missiles and drones aimed at Israel. Mad Israel's spy apparatus has a long-standing history of assassinating its foes, including in Iran, where it has eliminated higher-file nuclear scientists, but Mossad has never gone so far as to assassinate a head of state. Doing so would be an explicit act of war that would call for a violent Iranian response. It would be reckless to risk such hostility just to assassinate Raisi, a profoundly unpopular politician who lacks final authority over many of Iran's key policy decisions. So Israel's involvement is unlike, but that won't stop Iranian officials from promoting conspiracy theories either way. Raisi's death will exacerbate infighting within the upper ranks of the elite. This is not a system where people leave empty-handed. If necessary, they can cut off hands. I've been your host, Shivan from Caspian Report. If you approve of what we do, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and mayhaps share the video. In any case, thank you for your time and soul.